So let me call the Gloucester Board of Health meeting to order. It is Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. We are in the Harbor Masters Conference Room. And before we begin official business, I must tell you for the public that consistent with Chapter 107 of the Acts of 2022, this meeting is being conducted by hybrid remote participation. The public may physically attend the meeting or may attend via Zoom. In any case, every effort will be made to allow the public to listen to the meeting in real time and participate when necessary. If you are participating via computer, please note that you can request to speak by pressing *9 on a phone or on a computer. Press the raise hand buttons that you can tap or press to request to speak. And you can use either of these options during oral communications to be recognized to speak. All votes by the Board of Health during this and all meetings will be by roll call vote. And please note that the order of the agenda can and will be modified at the board's discretion. So firstly, let's go around the table and introduce those present, starting with the acting director.
Jill Cahill, Chief Administrative Officer.
Don Gannon, board member.
Joe Rosa, chair.
Eric Kaplan, board member.
Marco Pelzillo, board member.
Thor Akerley, board member.
And the members of the staff members.
Bree Gray, Health Inspector.
Chelsea Goldstein Walsh, Prevention Director.
Cindy Junker, Nurse.
Leslie Newland, Sanitarian.
And Lee.
Leo Leary, Financial Specialist.
And we have some guests with us that will make a presentation shortly. If you guys could just introduce yourselves.
Peter Seminara, Shellfish Constable.
Rebecca Bisnick, Deputy Shellfish Constable, Brooke DeJarvin, Division of Marine Fisheries.
Thank you. First of all, introduction of our newest board member, Thor Akerley. Thor has a bit of a history with Gloucester. He was in the department, worked for the Department of Health for some period of time, and now is off on private enterprise, but is back serving on the board. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Thor. So next on the agenda is public oral communication. That's an opportunity for the members of the public, whether present or via Zoom, to speak up to 3 minutes on an item that is not on the agenda. Do you see anyone who wishes to speak?
No.
All right. So the next item before I make a motion to change the order of the agenda is to approve the minutes of February 2nd, 2023.
I move that we approve the minutes of February 2nd, 2023.
Is there a second?
Second.
Marco seconds. Any discussion? Any alterations, amendments to be made? So let's vote. Done. I vote to accept the minutes.
Eric Kaplan, yes.
Marco, yes.
Thor,
Thor?
yes.
The minutes are accepted as written. So then I'd like to move that we alter the order of the agenda, since one of our members of the department, the acting director, must leave before the conclusion of the meeting. And I would like to move that we move to discuss new business next on the agenda and put committee reports after that.
I'll second that.
Seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye. So I don't know what process we want to use. Are there going to be individual presentations?
It's gonna be
Peter,
one,
you're
it's gonna
gonna
be one
speak.
presentation. I'll give a general background of what's going on, and then we
Okay.
can go into the Zoom presentation.
Can,
Do you want me to put up the PowerPoint now?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Lee, is Peter going to be okay sitting where he is? in terms of
He should be
people hearing?
because the presentation will
Okay.
be on the screen, but the microphone picks up.
Okay.
Yeah, he
good.
should be fine.
Thank you for having us first. We appreciate this. So in 2018, there was a report of somebody dumping something into one of the storm drains on Atlantic Street. It was an unfounded report. However, when the Division of Marine Fisheries,
So we're introducing a problem that we've been dealing with for a long time in the Jones River. So we're gonna kind of tell you guys where we're at right now, kind of the history of the issue. And then we're gonna most likely need help from the Board of Health in the future. So we just wanted to give you a whole background of the whole situation that we've been dealing with, as well as the data that Division of Marine Fisheries has as well. So you can pop to the next slide, and you can go ahead with your timeline.
oh, it's the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay.
Marco, do you want to move over to this one?
So in 2018, we got a report dumping. It was unfounded. But when we did test the water coming out of the 3 outfall pipes at Atlantic and Concord Street, we got consistently high fecal coliform levels, which ultimately led to a delay in the opening of the seasonal winter flat in the Jones River until February 2019. Between February 2019 and August 2019, they reclassified the Clamshell Point area of the Jones River as a prohibited area. We continued sampling the Jones River pipes on a weekly basis, continued to get consistently high counts, and ultimately the Division of Marine Fisheries in August 2019 changed the classification of 2 sub areas of the Jones River, including Cross Creek, the mouth of the Jones River on both the southern and northern ends, to a seasonal closure, which ultimately are on the same season now as the Jones River. So the long and the short of it is our commercial industry has lost almost the entire western side of the Annisquam River to a seasonal closure. In September 2019, we identified 4 properties on Cedarwood Road that had septic systems that were out of compliance or in need of repairs. And by March 2020, 7 Cedarwood, which was the primary location that we identified, had ultimately repaired their tight tank. The other properties, 2 are working to get the septic loans for their repairs, and the property at 13 Cedarwood is in foreclosure by the bank. The house is under contract. The new owner says that he intends to replace the septic system when the ground thaws.
So this is the area we're talking about. Up by the black box on the screen is Wingersheek Beach with the whole channel of the Annisquam River. The offshoot to the left is Cross Creek and then Jones River going all the way down to the red box. So the red box is around the Cedarwood, Concord Street, Atlantic Street neighborhood. That is the area of concern. And that little squiggly marsh at the bottom is where we've been doing a large majority of our testing. So that's kind of our focus area, just so you guys get a view of where we're talking about.
So the outfall pipes that you talk about, those are like culverts that go.
Oh yeah, we'll get
underneath
into it. You'll be
I'm just
familiar.
trying to locate things for people. They
They're-
go underneath
They
Concord,
go under the
You
intersection
can
of
go to the
Concord and
next one.
Atlantic Street.
right?
Ta-da, there
Can you
they
just
are.
can you just go back once real quick, just one time?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, I don't know if I know how to go back.
I'm like, sure you can.
No, no.
I don't know how to go back.
All right.
The
I'm
opposite
not
of
an
going, the
admin.
opposite of going forward.
I just said this button.
All right.
And we could send this to
Yeah.
anybody.
No, no, I don't want to deal with it. I like the Google Earth map. That's great, thanks.
So this shows you from our map geo, where the road runoff plumbing goes under the roads, and then it points out the 3 pipes that we test right at the corner there. And then it's circled in pink, there are some culverts to allow the stream to flow behind that neighborhood. I have never really been able to find them just because there's so much growth back there. There's a string at the middle circle that you can pull in theory to like clear some debris out of the way to allow the water to flow instead of inundating yards.
Responsibility to handle that is
Sort of unknown.
unknown. They're unaware if it's the owners of 5, 7, or Marshall's Farm Stand that actually are responsible for clearing that particular culvert. Those yards inundate
During wet weather.
anything above a half an inch of rain, those yards will inundate
Marshall's are the buildings just to the north.
to the very top of the slide.
Yep. Yep, and then we did install a flow meter with.
The DPW installed it for
Yeah,
us.
to help us get an accurate reading coming out of the center pipe, because that's the pipe that has the highest flow. And we did get that data for what was it, year
About a-
contract?
Yeah,
And then
about a
the
year.
contract Expired.
When the contract expired, the DPW couldn't afford to fund it any longer, and our budget is too low, so that flow meter was removed.
So you can go to the next slide. We'll see this map again later. So this is what it looks like at the guardrail on Concord Street. So this is kind of our scurry down to the sampling location.
Is this just before the turn off to Atlantic?
Yes.
Yeah, right on the corner
Right on
there.
the corner, there's the access point.
Yeah. You can go to the next slide. So this is that intertidal creek at a high tide and a low tide. So we can only go sampling at low tide because you can't really stand in there at high tide because you'll drown.
And it will cover the pipes too to a certain point that you can't really get what's coming out.
Yeah,
we're
so
unable
if you go to
do
the next slide, you can see there. So at low tide, the water is flowing and we'll have a bottle on a stick that we collect without actually touching the pipes. You're just getting the water without any contamination on the bottle. And then those are the pipes at high tide. So it's not accessible for sampling at all time.
Okay, one.
Next slide. So those are the pipes. We colloquially call them left pipe, center pipe, and right pipe. And then the P44, P45, and P46 are the names given to them by Division of Marine Fisheries. So
And
those are
this-
their like official
Station
sample
names.
station names.
The center pipe is the main pipe of concern. The right pipe tends to have very low flow. The center pipe is the upland stream of the Jones River where it passes under the intersection. It always has a consistently high flow. And that's where we've gotten the highest counts up to, I believe, 80,000 fecal coliform colonies per 100 mils of water at one point.
Is the right pipe obstructed or?
No, the right pipe just has an Atlantic Street storm drain that flows into it. So this time of year, you'll get snow melt, you'll get some flow, but in the summertime during dry weather, it very rarely has flow.
We can go to the next one. So this is just a view of what our sample sheet looks like when we go down to sample the pipes. This is one from August 2019. And then you can see where the lab technician has filled out the fecal coliform results. So
Yikes.
yeah,
Not
it's
that great.
Not the best. Not the best. So you can go to the next slide.
Yeah, so gonna throw some numbers at you in the next few slides, some graphs and stuff like that. So just to give you a little background, and if I'm repeating things that people are already aware of, I'm just trying to cover my bases here. So DMF is participating in the National Shellfish Sanitation Program, which is a state and federal cooperative program that works with FDA and the ISSC. And FDA actually evaluates state shellfish programs for efficiency, and the NSSP is there to basically provide.
Can you do some of those acronyms? I think we got most.
Sorry, NSSP, yeah, so National Shellfish Sanitation Program.
And
Um,
for the people watching,
ISSC is the Interstate Shellfish Sanitation Conference. And FDA is the Food and Drug Administration. And so the NSSP essentially is there to provide guidance and structure and uniformity for programs to participate in interstate commerce with their mollusk and shellfish. So it's essentially a volunteer program, but if you want to have interstate commerce, you participate in it. So everybody participates in the NSSP. They set forth something called a model ordinance, which basically are guidelines that programs are required to follow and to adhere to, that are water quality standards that help us classify growing areas. And we're allowed to use total coliform or fecal coliform as a water quality standard. Massachusetts uses fecal coliform as an indicator of bacteria of any other potential disease-causing bacteria. And essentially, there's two water quality standards that go along with the fecal coliform bacteria. They look at geometric mean and estimated 90th percentile or percentage factor. And for an approved classification, which is what the Jones River is, the Jones River is a conditionally approved area. So for an approved classification, the geometric mean has to be less than 14 fecal coliform, and no more than 10% of samples can exceed 31 fecal coliform. So just to give you an idea of, those are two kind of standards that 14 and 31 are the two kind of standards that are used for looking at water quality data. So going forward, I'm going to be showing you data that's coming out of the pipes. And just keep in mind that that data isn't used to classify the overlying waters. We have classification stations in the overlying waters that we use to get these statistics and provide the classification. But we can still use the 14 and 31 as kind of as indicators of where the water quality is at for the pipes. So
could you just repeat what the percent less than 31, what is that?
So-
Less than 95%?
if no more than 10% of samples can be greater than 31. So estimated 90th percentiles measure a variability. So you're going to have a lot of different intermittent pollution events that could cause some wide range of fecal coliform in your sample set, right? So this will kind of detect that and remove it. So this first slide here is just showing you the fecal coliform at those pipes for that year of intensive sampling that was conducted by DMF and Rebecca and Pete. This was September 2018 through September 2019. Again, P44, 45, and 46, it's left, middle, right. Those are the pipes, just to remind you. And I put some dotted lines there for you at the 14 geomean and the 31 estimated 90th percentile, just so you can see how many samples are, above that threshold there. So this is a total of 70 sampling events and 180 samples altogether. I believe it's 63 samples collected were below that approved standard of 14 or 31. And you can see that it's mainly, not mainly, but in general, that middle pipe there, P45 is having most of the high counts. And it's mainly occurring in those summer and fall months, which is kind of where that closure comes from, that seasonal closure. And that highest count up there, that's a count of 81,000 fecal coliform that Peter mentioned. And that occurred, technically the Jones River was in a closed status. It was after a 1.07 inch rainstorm, but it was still an astronomically high hit for just a 1 inch rain event. So this is just to give you an idea of kind of, where the numbers are for the pipes. Next slide.
You seem to be measuring all three pipes for most of those measurements.
Yeah.
So there is something that flows through the rightmost pipe, but occasionally?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still kind of combing through data. I feel I just started this position in October, so I'm still kind of getting familiar with things, but it seems that P45, the middle pipe, definitely has the highest counts, but there is elevated FC, significantly elevated, I'd say significantly elevated fecal coliform coming out of the left and right pipe at times as well.
But the volume is highest in the middle pipe.
Yeah, and you can see this graph will actually kind of shows that. So this is the flow rate for those sampling events during the.
So not only is the concentration of fecal coliforms highest in the middle pipe, the volume, the total volume is highest. So
Yeah.
that just exacerbates.
Exactly,
the
yeah.
problem.
Yep, and the volume coming out of the other two pipes is pretty high too. So as you can see, I mean, the scale is in gallons per minute. So pretty consistently, we're seeing above 300 GPM for the center pipe in those kind of looks like spring and then summer months, which correlates with snow melt and that the heavy rainfall that's usually associated in the summer months. So you're getting those fairly high counts there. And then you can see that the left pipe is flowing a lot of the time. And then it looks like the right pipe is the one that is, flowing at the least. So this is just kind of give you an idea of where, which pipe is, showing the highest volumes. Again, like that center pipe P45 seemed to be the biggest culprit. And I think that's because it's believed to be that that's the actual Jones River. That's the culvert that the Jones River is flowing through, whereas the two other pipes are storm drains. So as Pete said, they're only flowing, intermittently during or after heavy rain events, whereas the center pipe is always flowing essentially.
So is that known for certain? And
So-
people done dye studies or anything like that?
So at one point, the DPW contractor, they TV'd it and were able to determine that the center pipe feeds directly to the Jones River. However, our current GIS software shows all of the storm drains on Cedarwood and Fenley feed into that same pipe as well, versus out the left of center pipe.
They all meet in one.
So it's
They all meet at the intersection where the flow meter
Yeah,
was.
and we'll be able to pull that map up again.
That map's
in the-
gonna,
in the
yeah, we'll re-show
slideshow.
that map.
So would that mean that bacteria is coming from?
It could be coming,
Upstream?
right now, it could be
Before?
coming from anywhere on Cedarwood and Fenley Road.
Or
Or
upwind.
upstream of that neighborhood, which we kind of dealt with fecal coliform counts that high. It's almost always a human caused septic issue somewhere in the infrastructure. You don't see 80,000 counts with wildlife.
We go to the next slide. And then this is just it's just a table for you to get a look at some numbers as well, and some sites, just to show you, again, there are those three pipes at that intersection there. The red is showing you all the area that's prohibited currently, and then the blue is the conditionally approved area that is open seasonally and with the rainfall threshold of 1 inch. So that clamshell point number 43, that station was established, I believe, sometime in 2019 to kind of assess the effectiveness of the prohibited area and the dilution in that area. And the number 37, the classification line, that's a recently established station. We only have a couple of samples from that site, so I didn't include them in this presentation because I only have, I think, 1 or 2 so far. And then the nearest classification station to that is number 21, which is near the YMCA camp. And then this is just showing you some paired sampling that was done at the 3 pipes. And then unfortunately, people here can't see it. The box is covering. It says the second to last column says clamshell point, and then the last column is the YMCA. So it's 44, 45, 46, 43, and then 21, just so you.
That's the YMCA campground.
Yeah. So that's like right.
No, Camp Spindrift,
Yeah,
Is
not
that?
the campground. Yeah.
Oh, yes,
Camp
Cinder.
Spindrift.
Sorry, I'm
Okay, yeah,
still
yeah.
learning.
Versus the camp. We're gonna address that.
And those are fecal coliform in the two red
Yes, I'm
columns.
sorry. Yes, those are people coliform numbers. Thank you for asking that question. And so this is showing you that we're getting right now the prohibited area is sufficient in diluting, the water quality. We went from 81,000 to 81, which is still high. That's still high. That's not approved. And then in the nearest classification station, number 21 at YMCA, we're at 41, which again, that's too high. That's a number we'd have to close on, basically. So again, that number is during a rainfall event, so it would have been closed anyways, but it's just showing you how far this problem can extend to, and that, yes, the current prohibited area is large enough, but then again, 20 years ago, it was half the size and that was large enough. So it's just showing you how the problem's kind of exacerbated over the years.
There are any sample dates in the last 3 years?
We don't have that much data.
It's old data. It's like.
So during the coronavirus pandemic, the Division of Marine Fisheries were short-staffed. It was difficult to get anything but the basic water sampling that was required into their lab. So they mainly stuck to their classification runs for all of their coastal areas, and they're covering the state. The lab has to handle almost the entire state's classification runs. So
All
subsidi-
non-essential data was kind of.
subsidiary data, they just weren't able to handle it. They weren't able to process it in the lab. So there's a gap in data until this year again.
Yeah, and then there was some staff turnover at DMF as well. So there was a gap, like a 6 month to 9 month gap there as well. So that's why there's a bit of, that's why we're here just to tell you about the project, how we're trying to revamp it again, because we have this kind of lapse in data. So we're trying to, but the latest data we do have isn't really, all that great. So
At that point, by the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, we knew that the problem wasn't going to fix itself, and just continued testing was just utilizing a waste of manpower, because we knew we were going to get consistently high counts at certain times of year in certain weather conditions, always out of the center pipe, and that the prohibited area was sufficient to dilute it. And we just kept our fingers crossed that it didn't need to get extended any further, which the outside sampling stations would be telling us that. You can see where the 81 and the 41. So if those counts had consistently stayed higher, then the question would be, is the closed area sufficient, or do we lose more flat in the river?
Right.
And just to clarify, the 43, 37, 21, and the remainder of all of our shellfish areas in Gloucester are tested once a month. So we have that monthly data, but not the pipes specifically. And those are to maintain the status of the fishery. So those are mandatory.
next slide. And sorry to throw more numbers at you. And this is kind of a lot to look at, but basically I just broke down the data by season. Just thought it'd be interesting to see kind of where that closure comes from. There's that seasonal closure that's May 1st to November 30th. And you could kind of see why. I mean, you're getting the higher FCs again from that middle pipe, especially in the summer and fall months. And then you're getting the higher flows in kind of early spring, summer months, again, from that middle pipe, which makes sense, snow melt.
Is this recent data?
Activity. This is all of the data that was shown in the previous slides, the 2019 data. So yeah, it's the most recent data set. I mean, we have other little like blips of data, but nothing that's really cohesive.
The consistent data ended March 10th, 2020, right prior to the COVID-19 pandemic.
And it also kind of shows you the number of sampling events. So at least for that P46, that right pipe, you can see that, there were occasions where it wasn't even flowing, which is also, I think, just interesting to see. The next slide. And then finally, some maps, just to kind of round it out and let you know like how things have changed from pre-2019 and how they are currently. So December 2018 and prior, there was a small prohibited area that was about 6.8 acres in size. You can see it It's right below the N 9.21 there on the map, that small red area. That's about 6.78 acres in size, and that was the original prohibited area around the pipes. And that together with the red area right above it is another prohibited area around the Brooks Road Short Wharf area. And together those comprised N 9.21. And the Jones River itself that is conditionally approved is in the yellow. And that was having the seasonal closure of
Closed May 1st
Wait a minute.
and it opens December 30. I mean, it opens December 1st.
December 1st, yeah, sorry. It has that seasonal closure and the rainfall closure of anything greater than or equal to an inch. And then everything in blue was N7, N9.7, and that also has a rainfall closure, but no seasonal closure. So that's open year round unless there is a rainfall event greater than or equal to 1 inch. And then after, the abundance of sampling that took place and all the events that happened in 2019, there were some changes made and an additional 13 acres was added to that prohibited area. That's now N 9.22, now referred to as Clamshell Point. And that's also where we added that extra pollution source station to kind of assess that dilution that was coming out of the pipes and how efficient that prohibited area is at diluting. And 9.21 became its own area. And then to a northern and southern section of N 9.7 that we now refer to as Jones River Marshes were pulled from N 9.7 and are now 9.24, 9.23. And those are now considered the Jones River. Those are on the same seasonal schedule as the Jones River with the rainfall threshold as well.
So you can see on the map, the amount of ground, the amount of harvestable flats that were lost between 2018 and 2019, whether to outright classification change to prohibited or put on a seasonal closure and became basically winter flats. So the entirety of Cross Creek, which was a year-round flat, is now a winter flat. Jim Durney's now a winter flat to the south there. So that composes the major portion of harvestable area on the western side of the Annisquam River, which unfortunately, being closed seasonally, forces commercial harvesters to the eastern side of the river, where those flats are rapidly becoming unsustainable.
Right.
So can I go back a bit? I'm a bit lost as to where the area, what is on these maps that we were just talking about, all the culverts and
Yep,
left, right.
so if you look at the
Get up and
map,
point at it.
I don't want to stand in front of the camera. So the culverts, I know, I'm sorry, it's a lot of area, but if you guys can see, so this right here, the culverts, see this intersection right here? The culverts are coming out of these pipes right here.
That's
So this
Concord and
is-
Atlantic Street.
Yeah, this is that intersection. These are neighborhoods we were concerned with in
So
Marshall's.
that ends up, so the flow from those culverts ends up in ultimately in the Annisquam. But so show me how it flows.
Yep, so it will come out of these pipes and then come into these tidal waters right here. So this was the original prohibited area, which in 1999, I think that was the year, that closure zone area is based on a fecal coliform count of 2,400, which, as you've seen, we've recently in the past few years have had much higher than that. So they needed a closure area that was much smaller. That's then coming to 2019 and to current, then inherited another 13 acres. So added this section right here.
Yeah.
Onto that. So it's now a total of about 20
But the
acres.
flow beyond that point, what gets to the big red area?
So the Jones River empties or fills from both the northern and southern mouth. So on an incoming tide in the Jones River, as the tide's coming in, it's coming from the north enter the Jones River at both of those mouths and fill the Jones River. On the outgoing tide,
It's the other way around.
they'll exit from both sides.
Right. So there's a lot
So
of
that-
mixing.
That closed area, any pollutants coming out of that closed area, not only infiltrates the Jones River, but can ultimately exit the Jones River from the north and the south and enter the Annisquam River proper.
Right.
We haven't got high enough counts yet for it to be concerning. But the high counts in late July and early August 2019 were concerning enough that they changed the classification of the new areas where she has the slash marks, yellow with the slash marks, to a seasonal closure. Because they tended to act more like the Jones River during rain events than the Annisquam, the main body of the Annisquam River during a rain event. Pretty much, the Annisquam River flushes all of the water in one day. So it has a 3-day closure. If there's a rain event of 1 inch, they close it for 1 day to let the pollutants out, and then it stays true. So it's a full 3-day closure. The next 2 days are for the shellfish to depurate themselves, which is the same closure as the Jones River, except during the summer months, water quality just never meets the standards that are acceptable to shellfish harvest. It's confusing.
It's actually shocking.
The next slide, and if you want to go to the next slide, that will really simplify it. So basically, pre-2019, there was a total seasonal closure of only 84 acres, and now it's 137 acres. So we've lost 57 acres to a seasonal closure, which means 53 acres to a seasonal closure. So that means there's a total of 137 acres that now is in a closed status for May 1st to November 30th, when weather permitting. And we lost another 13 acres to be completely prohibited, which means it's not harvestable at all any time of year. So that just kind of puts what I just showed you on a map into, I think, a little bit more. easier
And
to
for
understand.
the commercial shell fishery in Gloucester, the Jones River is of probably greater than 1/3 of our fisheries annual income. This is our primary winter flat. And accounts for a good 1/3 of the fisheries income in Gloucester's soft shell clam production.
So this is a disaster.
This is,
Yeah.
this is a significant, this has been a significant impact to the fishery.
So if we went back one slide, Jill.
Can't go back, but I can exit and go back. Are you guys done? Want to go through and then you can
So,
close them
so
out?
my question
Yeah.
is, I've got the hard copies.
Yeah.
It's just this.
Is it
Oh, look, I
known
figured it
what,
out.
Oh,
ah,
there we go.
is it known what's causing,
At the Brooks Road area,
yeah,
so
is it related to what we've been
the
talking
Brooks Road
about?
is
No.
a separate event. Primarily, that closure was enacted due to runoff from Brooks Road, stormwater runoff from Brooks Road, and the septic and sewer infrastructure of the Cape Ann campsite. We're unable to find when and if those issues have been rectified enough that we can begin sampling data in that closed area as well.
Because the thinking is that you want to have some assurance that something's changed before you spend the money to sample. Is that?
The Division of Marine Fisheries have done everything they can to identify the problem, and primarily through water sampling. And it's obviously infrastructure related issues. And that's where the city now, so to reopen a area that's classified as prohibited, they need 3 years of dry weather sampling data, which we have plenty, which is plentiful. They also need 3 years of wet weather sampling. So if we started today, reducing or opening those red areas wouldn't be for 3 to 4 years.
Right. But
And a lot happens in 3 to 4 years. So beyond what we have now, the Division of Marine Fisheries can continue to test. But it's not gonna tell us any more than we already know, that fecal coliform levels are extremely high in especially the Clamshell Point area.
There are more slides?
Yeah. Sorry to keep you guys so long for this.
So again, this is just an overview of the area, and this is the original Clamshell Point prohibited area. So what we are looking to do.
so those houses there are cedar wood? Is that-
Yeah, with Marshalls. And then there's the pond at the top left. So our goal moving forward to kind of refocus on solving this and maybe being able to test to reopen some of those areas is to go out and test along the stream. So behind all of the properties on Cedarwood, and maybe even all the way up to the pond, so that we can see where we start to see those high fecal coliform levels and kind of start to re-problem solve. And then potentially need help from you guys to troubleshoot if we find an issue that is a septic system. So we're looking to kind of refocus and test a little bit further upland so that we can look at the pipes kind of with fresh eyes.
In the past,
and-
dye samplings were conducted, optical brightness samplings were conducted, they were all fairly negative. Dye sampling tends to be more of a, you don't get an immediate result. You need to have the right conditions. To dye sample a house, the septic tank needs to be inundated. And to wait for, I mean, where the rain events are unexpected.
Right.
So our ultimate goal is to seek support to establish sampling stations on the entire upland stream to the pond, work our way back. We would use our department's manpower, and the Division of Marine Fisheries graciously will test the samples in their labs free of charge. So everything remains consistent. They're already set up to test for fecal coliform. And then once we isolate the uppermost area where we start to see contamination, we will eliminate the stations that have nothing and then work our way back towards the neighborhoods.
So you can go to the next slide.
So you need authoritative support or financial?
We
support?
have technically, both the shellfish officers and the Division of Marine Fisheries have the authority to go onto private property
Yeah.
to conduct sampling. What we need from the Board of Health would be, if we identify something, to take enforcement action. Because the limit of our enforcement action would be a violation of Mass General Law 130, Section 25, which is introducing a pollutant to a shellfish area. So the Board of Health, we would need, cease and desist letter or urine, other compliance, et cetera. We would need the administrative support.
Well, and at that, like I said, at that point, once they identify it, it gets handed over to. the
Yes,
Board of
we would
Health.
identify it and then,
And it would be the Board of Health and the sanitarian's decision on what to do next.
yes.
So
I'm guessing the Board of
Leslie,
Health.
not to put you on the spot,
Let
but
it be time.
can you say a few words about what has transpired over the past couple of years with regard remediation of failed
We have a
systems?
slide for that, actually.
You have?
Yeah, and Leslie's
keep
happy
going.
to weigh in as well. So if you want, I think it's the next. Yeah,
The next, yeah.
next one. So this was done in 2019, so it is outdated by a few years, but this was when septic systems were pumped out or prior to
Do
their
you want to
pump
let
out.
Leslie or this is related to septic systems, it should probably be
Yeah.
reported.
Yeah,
Please go.
so there have been updates as well more recently. Which was 7 Cedarwood was updated.
7 Cedarwood is repaired, compliant. 13 is in foreclosure. I spoke to the mortgage broker that currently owns the property and it's under contract. And 11 Bentley, I believe, is in the process of repairing
It's
their tank.
3 and 13 Cedarwood are the two that are in the process of,
Do you
in
agree
the
with
work,
that,
that should
Becky?
hopefully be in the process by the spring. There's just the foreclosure on 13 and the buyer saying he wants to wait till the ground thaws, which could be tomorrow at this point, who knows? But he's waiting for the ground thaw, I guess, to start his repairs. And then the other one at 3 Cedarwood is working on a tight tank plan, right? Leslie, you can chime in if you'd like.
I don't know if it's a tight tank off the top of my head, I'd have to look it up. But yeah, 3 and 13 are both very close to being repaired.
There's nobody living at 13, obviously.
Correct.
Yeah, there should be no outflow from that right now.
So that system is actually under the rear porch of the house. It was difficult to find. We weren't able to find it the day we pumped them out. And when we did find it, they weren't able to access it. The DPW wasn't able to access it. It was pretty hidden. And 3, the fill, the pump out location was under a foot of lawn. We had to dig it out. So we could tell that those hadn't been pumped out. And
Yeah.
they had to use a breaker botter to kind of chop up the solid waste.
Marshall's Farm, the horses and the goats and the lambs.
Marshall's Farm Stand actually was under an enforcement order by the DEP and they completed their requirements the last we heard. So we don't
suspect it, but if we test upstream. And if there's anything, we'll find it, but
But they were under an enforcement order, which they completed at the end of last year. If I may have it here.
So what's the most recent data that you have that would serve as a baseline that you hope to see changes from?
Wet weather, we'd have to start, yeah,
We would-
wet weather data, we need to wait until either the
3 and 13.
3 and
fixed.
13 are fixed, or we'd have to, or other remediation efforts were made, and then we could start after we know that those have been put into place. Right now, we don't have any data that we can build a classification change on.
And again, due to turnover, personnel issues at Division of Marine Fisheries, pandemic, there is a significant gap in the data. We said they prioritize their mandatory classification sampling over an area that was already considered prohibited. So we would be starting from scratch with testing pipes. We would be starting from scratch, investigating that neighborhood, although we do know that 7, which was a major culprit, and 11 Fenley, which actually had active groundwater infiltration while they were pumping it out for areas of concern. And then beyond Fenley, up into that wooded area, we'd like to see a couple of sampling stations to begin with, working our way towards that pool, which is the headwater. We figure if we start totally from scratch, we're gonna get more accurate sampling, more accurate results that we can bring to the Division of Marine Fisheries, and then ultimately identify a problem, resolve the problem, and then begin wet weather sampling of the Clamshell Point area in the Brooks Road area, in the hopes to at least reduce those prohibited areas. If we can regain even a portion of the acreage from Clamshell Point, it'll alleviate the heavy stress put on those northern coves of the Jones River during the open season. And the easiest resolution for us would be to change the classification of N 9.23 and 24 back to a year-round fishery.
Is there more slides or can I?
Yeah,
go to
you
the-
can go ahead.
I
Yeah,
was gonna say,
Yeah.
I can go to the,
yeah.
Thank
So
you,
this,
I'll
if
do that.
anyone needs to see it again, is just a view of what's under the ground, supposedly.
And we haven't been
Structure.
able to
And then
confirm whether those storm drains on Cedarwood and Bentley connect to that center pipe or it overlaps and angles to the left pipe. And we would need to figure that out. That would help us in knowing whether it's 100% the Jones River flowing through the center pipe, or if it's the Jones River plus the stormwater in the associated neighborhood floating, coming out the center pipe.
Can the DPW help you? Because they have cameras that can go through these sewer pipes and everything.
That's the next step.
Do they know about
Yes.
this?
Mike was extremely helpful prior to the pandemic with giving us resources, including that flow meter, so that we can get a more accurate flow out of that pipe, that center pipe.
You can go to the next one.
So,
Just so you guys know, all of the departments, Conservation Commission, DMF, well, they're not us, but Shellfish, DPW, you know, everyone's been in, Health Department has been involved in this issue for.
Yes.
Thor, you probably remember this,
yes.
so there's a significant, it's been a significant amount of time.
So this is just another view of Brooks maps, as well as the official Division of Marine Fisheries map that is available on the state's website. And so it's more just to show you like the entire Annisquam River and how much space, how much acreage is lost seasonally. Just as a comparison, the big red area at the bottom is the harbor, which is prohibited. We can't do anything about that.
We have approximately.
We're not solving that.
We have
No.
approximately 36,000 acres of shellfish flat in Gloucester. And approximately 17,000 of those are in the prohibited status. No shellfishing will ever take place there. So approximately half of our shellfish flats are considered contaminated.
But so I'm all for fixing this problem. But given the absence of reasonably current data, how confident are you that the problem hasn't been fixed?
I don't think we are. I think we want to conduct at least one field visit and do that sampling behind the house and upstream and see what we get. And, you know, in a variety of weather conditions, maybe to see, you know, probably after a wet weather event, I think most likely based on our data is if we'll see something.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe the upgrades that have taken place, because I thought about that. I'm like, well, there's been significant, I mean, I know that the city has done significant work over the years too, and with the upgrades and the ones that are coming this spring, hopefully, knock on wood, it could be solved, hopefully, but.
So do you need anything from this board to accelerate that testing and to generate the baseline as to whether there is a problem now?
We can test. We can conduct all the water sampling by the Division of Marine Fisheries Standards and utilize their lab to get results. And then if that should help us isolate a location, if they don't go above Cedarwood, then we can basically assume it's the two remaining properties that will be having an impact. We just don't know. Then we don't know the numbers in the center pipe because of that gap in data due to
Sure.
personnel changes, the pandemic, et cetera,
Yeah.
was a pretty big monkey wrench in this project.
Yeah, so we wanted to introduce or reintroduce this so that when we start our testing again in the spring, and if there is something that comes up that aren't the two properties that are gonna be fixed, we can come to you guys, because somewhere we're non-existent because we're out. So this was just a reintroduction to be like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what's going on. We may call you crying saying, please help us if these things haven't been fixed.
By all means, and
Yeah.
if we can do anything to facilitate the testing, and thank you to DMF for doing, volunteering to, I hope you're volunteering to do.
Oh, yeah, I sample after the testing, but yeah, no, we have the resources definitely now to run the samples, and yeah.
Terrific. So Peter, if you can keep us up to date with
Definitely.
what the testing is showing, that would
Definitely.
be terrific.
So ultimately, our plan is to investigate and identify the sources.
Yeah.
That we haven't already identified. We don't know whether those sources that we identified were the sole sources or if there were other sources. We were getting extremely high counts.
Yeah.
That can't realistically be coming from. So 7 Cedarwood was a woman that lived alone. That's not going to produce that much of a count. At some point, there were several people living at 13 And there was no data from the wastewater treatment plant that the place had been pumped out in 2 years. So 7 was a definite concern because we visually inspected that tight tank and it was in failure. And 11 Fenley was a definite concern because we visually inspected that and noticed groundwater infiltration as we were pumping out. It was actively occurring. Beyond that, we don't know much about any of the other Fenley Road properties that were identified in a year 2000 study. Because their water table as well is only 6 or 8 inches below the lawns. And if you drive by that area in the winter, there's a noticeable sheet of ice that will run across the intersection at Fenley all the way down to Concord Street. If any of those properties are in failure, we don't know. We haven't, we did the properties on the adjacent to the creek. And that was the limit of our investigations until the pandemic ended. So basically, we would like to reinitiate sampling and go beyond the Cedarwood Fenley neighborhood. We want to go all the way, if we can, all the way up to the pool on the Greenbelt property, work our way back, isolate the beginning of the issue, and then begin remediation work with the city to try to correct it. And then once that occurs, or is in the process, Division of Marine Fisheries will be able to begin their necessary wet weather sampling, which will take, they need 3 years of data.
So they can't start climbing until 3 years from whatever.
That we won't be able to move that those prohibited
If the water
areas.
quality meets the parameters.
And I would have to conduct, there's other things that go into reclassification, to conduct a full
Meanwhile,
sanitary
the
survey. and
The
everything.
clams don't care if it's polluted or not, so that once you get the 3 years, you're gonna have a lot of clams.
The problem with that is they'll eventually become so thick that if there's a shellfish-borne disease, a communicable disease among shellfish, it'll spread rapidly, like neoplasia could spread rapidly through that area and eliminate the resource before we could open it. When you start to get concentrations of shellfish that thick, you have to worry about other.
Lovely.
Leslie, Thor, do you guys have any comments about just initiating the testing and establishing the extent to which the problem exists and hopefully identifying a source? Does that sound like a good idea?
I would say proactively, I think the local on-site wastewater regulations allow us to require Title V inspections of some properties that meet certain criteria within certain watersheds, and I believe the Jones River qualifies as that. You mentioned the problem with groundwater on Cedarwood Road. I've done a lot of soil testing out there and agree that it might not be 6 or 8 inches, but it is really high. And if you have even a system that is not a cesspool, it was designed, before 1995, and I don't know how many systems are out there that were installed back then or have been upgraded. Even if it looks like it's functioning okay, there's not even a 2 to 4 foot separation between the bottom of that system and groundwater. You're getting pollutants in the groundwater, and that may not show up in a regular pump out or something like
And
that.
keep in mind, the tight tank at 7 Cedarwood, it was in the front yard. Her backyard slopes down towards the creek and is completely inundated when in an inch or greater rain event. It basically becomes a swamp. So exfiltration from her tight tank would flow down the grade into her backyard and then into the creek. That's where we believe that at the highest, that's where the most serious failure that we observed. That and 11 Fenley.
Can that even be fixed?
She had hers repaired. That tight tank is repaired as of March 2020. March 10th, 2020 was the completion of that work.
Leslie, did you have any further comment?
No, I think it'd be interesting to see if the 2 that have been replaced in 2020 will make a difference, and then 3 and 13. 13 is vacant, so I would think that's maybe the equivalent of being fixed. So it'd be interesting now after the pandemic, being able to do testing to see if those septic systems will make a difference. And if they don't, your site investigations will identify areas for us to focus on, so it'd be great.
Well, thank you guys for listening to our
Thank you.
saga.
Keep us
Thank you. We, I will.
up to
Be in
date.
touch.
Good,
Appreciate it.
thank
Thank
you.
you, guys.
Learned a lot.
It's a lot of information at once.
And this is outside your purview because you're shellfish, but what about even fecal coliform levels that prohibit swimming, which is. down
So for
at the swamp.
swimming,
They do E. Yeah.
swimming, they
Different
test E. coli and it's 104.
On the
It's a
floor.
different stand, 104 per 100 mils of water.
That's the limit, or that's the.
That's the
result?
threshold.
That's the threshold, 104.
So when it reaches 104 swimming, they close, like for instance,
It's like that, Good Harbor Creek.
Creek.
Yes,
When the level, but they're
that's
testing,
another,
they're
that's
testing,
another meeting.
they're testing for E. coli. They're testing for general fecal.
I see.
And as Brooke mentioned, in the late 90s, when they were testing, their threshold was much, much, much higher. 2,400, you said?
That was what they got for a count, yeah. And
But their threshold of what was considered
acceptable.
acceptable was much higher than 14. I think it was 41.
Was it?
Yeah.
I'm not quoting, can't quote me on it. It was much higher than what the current threshold is, because the FDA lowers the threshold
As we learn more.
as they learn more
Yeah.
of what the effects of fecal coliform on shellfish consumption is. We test solely for the purposes of shellfish
I
consumption.
understand, right, and I didn't know that, yeah.
Um,
And who's measuring for E. coli at the Squam Jones River intersection?
we don't measure certain,
No.
so it's not
It's just lifeguard.
yeah, they only measure beaches, lifeguarded beaches, and that's all considered sandbar,
Which,
so anybody can go there.
yeah, well,
I would say,
it's thousands of people.
the way the Annisquam flushes, nearly every molecule of water in the Annisquam is gone in a 24-hour period. It's got an extremely fast current.
Yeah.
It's got an extremely deep end at both the north and the south. So even in the tidal areas, by the time you get to Wingasheek Beach at low tide, it's still fairly deep and there's a powerful current going both directions out of the Annisquam. So flushing of the Annisquam is actually very
Robust.
Thank goodness. For us.
compared to a smaller tidal creek like Good Harbor.
Right.
Okay, thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So you don't need any preemptive authority at this point.
Not at this
Just
point.
wanted to fill you all in.
All right, we'll include it.
We didn't want to start doing anything without you guys being aware of the full issue before we began setting up the application and conducting water testing.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
The worst part is you're still doing 10 years. You wonder why clamps are so expensive. So what happens when you do? What happens when it's so hot?
So let's begin going around the table with regard to the committee reports from staff. Jake isn't here.
I can read his.
Do his.
Yep, so Jake did 27 inspections this month. He responded to 2 complaints. And did 3 re-inspections based off those complaints. He kicked off event season with an event, Magnolia Library held a fundraising event on February 11th. Had food vendors and cocktails. And he has done all the grocery stores and all the corporate stores. A lot of the corporate entities will ask for permits, just copies of the inspection reports and stuff. So he wanted to get those out of the way because they tend to ask for those reports a couple times a year. Steve. Now on to mine. I did 14 rental inspections this month and responded to 6 complaints, 5 of them being housing related complaints, so it's been a busy month. And that's about it. Stuff.
Thank you, Bree.
Mine, please.
Oh, wow, you were fast.
Yeah.
Short and sweet. So in your packet is my chart with numbers for tasks that I did. If there's any questions, I can answer those. Sort of as an update on subdivisions, there's 2 subdivisions before the planning board, and we've asked the applicants to submit documentation that they're complying with our local subdivision water quality assessment regulations. We haven't yet received those, but when we do, we will hand those off to a consultant to review for the board. So that's a process. And, other than that, just doing plan reviews and Title V inspection reviews and that sort of thing. A few soil tests, soil evaluations, but it's slow this time of year. So that'll start to pick up soon. And then at the septic review subcommittee, we had one plan that we reviewed and are recommending that you all approve the variances.
763 Western Avenue.
The
Yes, that's the one.
recommendation is to approve the variance requested.
Make a motion.
Good.
I move to approve the variances reviewed and recommended for approval by the septic review subcommittee at their February 21st, 2023 meeting for 763 Western Avenue, with conditions as noted in the minutes of the meeting. Second.
I'll second that.
So is there anyone wishing from the audience, Lee, to speak to this?
No.
No? Anyone here? Any discussion on the motion? Let's vote then. Don,
Yes.
Joe Rosa, approve.
Eric approve.
Yes.
Or yes.
Okay, the variances at whatever it was, 763 Western Ave are approved. Cindy,
So I have provided you with a communicable disease report, and does anyone have any questions on that? And that covers the period of February 1st through the 27th. As far as my flu clinic schedule goes, I am maintaining the 1 clinic per month, and we will continue having it at the Y. Our next clinic is on the 7th. I am going to begin to offer Shingrix at those clinics as well, because today I spoke with Dave Holden, and those most needy members, his residents, were not interested. They at first were interested in getting it, and he said that now no longer are they interested. So I think we move along to the general public.
yes, okay.
So I will do that. And the BioBot reports have been very good lately. I do expect to see a little blip after February vacation, because when people travel, we see those tiny little blips. But people are not sick like they were before, so that's great. That's all I have.
Chelsea,
We have been busy holding a few different community events, we being the prevention team, so it's myself, Takia Faison, Liz Olson, and Rosalie Castro, who coordinates the Seniors on the Go bus. We had a couple in-person events held over February vacation for school. One was a 3-on-3 basketball tournament held at the YMCA and held in conjunction with the YMCA, which was great. It was for middle and high school students. We had over 50 kids participate, lots of rowdy boys. But it was great. We had a resource fair, a small resource fair where us as a prevention team were there giving out information, swag items, just trying to get the word out. The Open Door was able to provide healthy snacks. And Unity had a resource table as well, and also handed out lots of swag items so that kids were aware of services available. The following day, on the 22nd, we had an open house at the Riverdale Park Community Center, just to provide an opportunity for residents or any community member really to come and meet us, get to know us, and start to get familiar and comfortable with us being in that space, because we'll be holding some programming in that space and at Riverdale in the future, including a 3-day partnership with Art Haven over April school vacation, where kids can come and take art classes for free. And we'll be doing a summer capoeira class every Saturday for 6 weeks through Magma, also at Riverdale. So we're
What is that?
capoeira is a Brazilian dance, but also has some aspects of martial arts. I've never personally done it, but I plan on
You should come to
attending.
the Brazilian festival that happens every year outside of City Hall. And there's usually a demonstration of it. It's great. It's certainly great exercise.
Yeah, and
Couldn't get me
the
doing it.
the instructor who teaches the class is a man, which is, I think, great for boys and men to have like a strong male role model who's engaged in dance. So the purpose of that open house again was to just get people introduced to our team and also to the space. It was great. We had over 20 people come of all ages. And some of the kids came and stayed the whole time, just played games and did crafts. And again, Open Door provided some food and snack boxes for that, which was very helpful. We have a positive parenting solutions program coming up. This is not in your packet because the flyer was just made this week. It just finalized this week. So I brought a little copy to show. This is a free 7-week workshop for parents of children ages 2 to 5 years old that will be held at the Gloucester Preschool on Mondays from 4 to 5:30 p.m. So if anybody watching or anybody in this room knows any parents who might benefit, it's open to everyone. Childcare is provided and a meal is provided as well. Beyond that, we just applied today. We submitted the application for the Stop Act grant, which is a 4-year grant in the amount of $60,000 per year with the goal of preventing underage alcohol use. It's administered through SAMHSA, and we will find out, we won't find out till August if we got the grant, but it will start at the end of September if we do.
This is a grant we've had in the past, right?
We have, yeah, we had the grant, I believe, starting in 2016, 2017. We are eligible to reapply. The requirement is that if you currently have Stop Act funding, you can't apply, but we have not had it for several years, so we are reapplying. That's basically it. I know, I'll just say for Rosalie DeCastro, she did secure that $1,000 Awesome Gloucester grant and a $1,000 anonymous donation, and that was accepted by Budget and Finance, the Budget and Finance Committee. So she is authorized to use the funds now, and she has a great trip planned to have lunch at the Pilot House, one trip, and then a second trip planned to go to the Couch Cinema in Rockport and watch, I can't remember the movie. What is it?
Jersey Boys?
Jersey Boys. Yeah, they'll be watching Jersey Boys and getting lunch. So she's really excited, and it's 2 special trips that she wouldn't have been able to do under the Healthy Aging Grant currently because it restricts restaurant dining. So the older adults who take the bus are really excited. And I think
Good.
that's it for us.
That's it, I think, right? So finally, is Joyce still with us?
She is. Hello, everybody.
Thank you for staying with us, Joyce. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. It's always fun to sit through these meetings. I learn so much. So, because I never feel like it's a waste of my time.
Want to know, sure. So Joyce, I'm gonna basically leave it to you to walk us through the next step. We will, just for everyone's information, when we finally get to something that is on paper that we can all review, we will have to have a public hearing at one of our meetings, which entails appropriate notices to the public and to people likely to be affected by the regulations so that they can participate. But we're not there yet. We're still trying to formulate the language that we all agree with. And so Joyce, I'll leave it to you to take us through where we're at.
Okay, and for the new member, I think Thor, you haven't been introduced. I'm Joyce Redford. I am the director of the North Shore Cape Ann Tobacco Policy Program. Been doing this for 24 years, and welcome aboard. So I received, and I want to shout out to Lee. She's been very patient with my technical difficulties, and she sent me the questionnaire that was shared among you all, and you came to some consensus just in terms of, or at least it seems like there's some consensus with these questions. So do you guys have those charts available to you in front of you?
Yes, we do. Yes, somewhere.
Okay. So just based on the numbers, I'm going to not spend any time where there's like a unanimous decision, because we don't have to talk about anything. You all agree, and we'll put it in the final draft. And I'll call them out by number and we can have a discussion. So number 2 is no permit renewal if there's a sale, 3 sales, sorry, to a person under 21, and that would be within a 36 months period, because, you know, if they happen to have that over 5 years, it wouldn't carry the same weight. They could potentially have new employees or, you know, other factors that came into that. So it just, it seems like there was an agreement that makes sense. And it looks like one member said case by case. I would not argue that point. I would just say that we try very hard to stay away from those case by case situations, because it can get any city or town or Board of Health in some hot water, like if someone cries better or, you know, has a better story. So if the decision is just like concrete and flat across the board, it's just helpful for the boards to have that in writing, and then it's a level playing field for all your retailers. So that's, I would say that it looks like this is a yes, but if you guys want to discuss that, that's fine.
Anyone disagreeing with making this a yes, please speak up. Yes. Okay, Joyce, move on. We'll consider it a yes.
Okay, so that's good. I'm just going to put a check mark beside it on my end, and I'll include this in your draft that you'll review. And also, just keep in mind that the draft is a draft and it's not final until it's adopted. So if you held your public hearing and there was some persuasive argument or discussion that's, you wanted to tweak the language, that's still, you know, your opportunity is still there. And the other piece is, we can always revisit your regulation if there's one or more issues that, you know, arise in the process. So number 3 is cap or the reducing number. This one I did want to discuss with everybody, because it looks like, so we currently have a reducing cap, and my recommendation is just no city or town should be stepping back from the work that you've already done over the years. So a reducing cap means as businesses go out of business, and Joe brought a question to the table, and that was that he thought if a business was changing hands or ownership, so if Joyce is selling it to Joe, in the current draft, it says 30 days for Joe, who's going to buy my business, to go to the Board of Health and apply for that permit that is issued to the current establishment. And Joe's concern was that 30 days just didn't seem reasonable. And there's no reason why he recommended or suggested 90 days. There's no, that makes sense if it makes sense to all of you. It would just give someone 3 months to buy an establishment and then come to the Board of Health. Those permits are not, not like a liquor license. You can't sell them. They are non-transferable. They come back to the city or town, and then you'd reissue them. And it would just be, you're actually protecting the retailer and the value of that tobacco permit by ensuring that the next person who's buying it, if they want that permit, it's available to them. So I don't, yep.
So just to interrupt, my understanding, so suppose a business closes shop for whatever reason.
Yep.
And doesn't sell the business.
Yes.
So the renter, somebody is renting, they decide they no longer want to rent this business, so the place is closed.
Correct.
So how long it can be closed, not doing any business, and still have a viable, so that the new owner, when they show up, I don't know, 4 months later, can they still access that permit by applying to the health department?
With a retiring cap, you'd say, 60 days is what we say. If a business has been closed for 60 days, it's retired back to the city. And then if someone came and, it could become a barber shop for who knows, or anything. It could be a restaurant instead of a convenience store that held a tobacco permit. So that's typically the language we've used, and many of our collaborative members have that language with a retiring cap. And if there were no permit left and it was retired, it's done. If you choose to change that language from retiring to just having a cap, and your cap, let's say that store went out of business and there was somebody waiting for a permit, so they were on the wait list, they'd get it first.
Yeah.
And the person who goes into that location that used to be a convenience store would then be put on a wait list.
Yeah.
So that's the difference between retiring. Retiring really means ultimately we'd like to see these numbers go down, but not robbing a business of what is part of their value, which I think is
Right.
reasonable.
So for the rest of the board members, my concern about this is, ideally we want no one to be smoking at all. But I'd like that to happen through education rather than laws. And we want to prevent youth from smoking, and we do a lot. Joyce does a lot of good in that regard, and perhaps we'll get to that as well. And we have very stiff fines to prevent that. My concern is that in Gloucester especially, a number of places that sell tobacco are convenience stores.
Mhm.
That are the only store in an area that people can walk to and get milk and bread, day-to-day necessities, as well as tobacco, unfortunately. But tobacco is often what keeps them in business. And so I don't want to lose those stores. So the scenario I was highlighting was that someone might own the property and rent to someone to run the store. And the person running the store would say, I'm done with this. I don't want to do this anymore. And so the owner of the property still owns the property and would presumably want to rent it to somebody, but it might take some time. And it would take even a much longer if they lose their license to sell tobacco, because now the store is not so valuable anymore. That's my concern, that we don't want to lose the shops that are so important to a number of communities and sub-communities in Gloucester.
How does it have to be written?
Yeah, so Joyce, that was the issue that I wrote to you, that how do we minimize that possibility, I guess? And you that the language that we already have there basically covers that situation, but I guess I'm not sufficiently conversant in the legalese to be assured that that's the case.
So Joe, in that case, I would just suggest, I mean, you do have a current cap, and actually your current cap is 36. We have 31 retailers. It's, that's through attrition. We've lost several, and 3 of them were adult only establishments. So that wasn't a convenience store, and that had to do with laws even prior to state law. They just weren't sustainable.
Sure,
So
yeah.
I would recommend to the board that you maintain a cap and you are insured, and retail is like this. Retail is like a cap because it means that someone isn't going to move in next door and become their competition.
Yeah.
So you have support from the retailer who possesses the tobacco permit and in some way covets it and does the right thing and isn't selling to minors because it's such an important thing to them. The other piece is the dual cap. I just recommend this because in our collaborative, it was 2 months ago, we had 3 egregious adult only establishments and their permits were revoked permanently. And we're trying to eliminate some of those adult only establishments or at least not have them boom in a municipality, because they tend to be, and not all of them, but we certainly have found a lot of egregious behavior from a few of these establishments. And 2 of them, like I said, have been permanently revoked. And that meant not just selling to a minor, but, a wink and a nod and telling our youth to come back at night, which actually happened, going into an establishment and conducting an inspection and finding thousands of units of flavored product, which have been prohibited in Massachusetts at the state level since June of 2020. So I just think it's a reasonable thing. You don't need that many adult only establishments. And right now in Gloucester, there's one. It's Sunny Smoke Shop, the one on Washington Street. He did rename the one on Railroad Ave, but it's not adult only. So that's where the dual cap comes in. You just don't end up with a lot of these, smoke shops that can be problematic. And the city hasn't even seen that many, inquiries about these. So if you can stick with your 36, I think realistically, the city, those haven't been used in a long time. So those 5 have not been used in a long time. So if you're more comfortable saying, okay, we'll say 33, and they are arbitrary numbers. They're arbitrary based on what's happening in your municipality. So it was originally 36. I think that had to do with the number of retailers that were in Gloucester at the time. We're down to 31. And in fact, we're actually down to 30. I'm not really sure what's happening with Mobile Energy on, oh God, I can't remember the name of the street.
Yeah.
Over by the causeway. It's all torn up and I don't know what the intention, I don't know if it's gone for good because it wasn't just the removal of their gas tanks. It seems like a bigger endeavor.
Yeah.
So if they come back, renovation, you had asked about that, they can, if they kept their permit, it's alive and active. But I don't know what's going to happen in that location. So we're down to 30 active retailers right now in Gloucester.
By virtue, so sorry to interrupt, but by virtue of them paying for the permit, they've kept their permit active. Is that what you just said?
Yes.
Okay.
So when renovation is different than someone leaving their business, like they're just done, wrapped up generationally, it's run its course, they're not selling it. But if it's renovation, depending on the size of the place, it could take 6 months, even longer.
Sure.
So if they're paying for their permit, which isn't an astronomical fee, it's active and it's in use.
Yeah. All right. So can you, so the simple cap is just a static number that doesn't change. That's
Correct.
my understanding, Joyce. Could you explain the other two varieties?
So the reducing cap is, or AKA retiring cap.
Right.
If you, and reducing is different because like the city has already reduced by 5 just through attrition.
Yeah.
But if you retire, it just means that they're not, you've gone from your current 30, and when someone goes out of business and that business is not sold, our language, our template language says 30 days, you could make that 60 or 90. If that business is not transferred within that period of time, that permit would no longer be available to anybody. The permit number would then go down to 29. And if a person sold, Joyce's Variety to Joe, and you went and applied for that permit, you'd have that time frame to take it. So our goal is not to put anybody out of business and not to devalue their business. But if you don't want to do a retiring cap, we can revisit this in a year and see where we're at, or 2 years, and see what's happening with, the convenience store industry, the tobacco industry, whatever. Or you can just keep it a static number, and same thing would apply if somebody sells their business, that permit can be transferred to the new owners within 60, 90 days, whatever that is. And then the dual cap one is just for convenience stores or gas stations, the kind of stores that can carry everything else, like bread, lottery, alcohol, doesn't matter. And an adult only would be no one under 21 is allowed to go in or buy anything, and they can't have any of the other products. They can't sell alcohol, newspaper, gas, lottery. And that, if you haven't been there, that's exactly what Sunny Smoke Shop on Washington Street is. He sells cigars, vape products, glass pipes, etc.
But currently in Gloucester, he does that under our reducing cap. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes. So he holds one of the 36 that you have in the city available.
And the dual cap would create a separate category, which would be separately capped. Is that correct?
Yes, but still part of the whole number. So if you said we're going to have 32, let's say, and only 2 can be adult only,
Yeah, okay.
then the only way that can transfer is if someone comes in to buy that establishment and also wants to be adult only.
Right. I have no strong feelings about how to cap numbers, so I'm happy to hear arguments from other board members as to what you would like.
Simple cap. What the easiest. I agree with you. Taking away business.
I agree with that. I think not encouraging additional shops to open up is good too.
Mhm.
Can always revisit it.
Yeah, Joyce, I think that, I don't know whether you've heard the quiet comments. There seems to be a consensus to start with the simple cap, and if we have to, we will revisit it, particularly if you can give us other data from other communities that are successfully using a reducing or dual cap. But right now, I think the consensus among the board is to start with the simple cap at whatever it was.
So
30.
my question to the board for the draft is, given that you currently have 30 active, 31 issued, and your cap is 36, is there
I would reduce it now.
So start with 33 or something like that.
right, that's my point, like, and just not leaving all these open and having not more and more, because
I agree, and so let's, just for the sake of argument and time, let's nail it, put the cap at 33.
perfect. And call it the simple cap. Okay, great. Moving on. Number 4 is consensus, so we don't even have to discuss it.
Yeah.
New permits within X number of feet, and it looks like 1,000 feet was the highest number, highest percent. And someone answered without defining it. And again, retailers love this. You're not gonna have two people in this, or two businesses in the same plaza, or, you know, next door to each other competing for business.
Right.
I have no strong feeling other than I'm happy with 1,000. Any other comments? Let's go with 1,000, Joyce.
Okay, this ban on smoking bars, I just have to say, this is already, someone answered no, but this is already and has been for a long time. There are no smoking bars allowed in Gloucester and haven't been, I think, since at least 2016, maybe even earlier. It's just in the ETS regulation, it says, you know, smoking is prohibited in public places, restaurants, blah, blah, blah. And it says except, and it talks about private residents, but it doesn't say except for smoking bars. So I would strongly encourage the city to stay with that, you know, no smoking bars.
Agreed.
That's fine.
Next, including minimum cigar pricing and packaging that already exists. There was one tweak in it that in the template, it raises the minimum price from $2.50 for a single and $5 for any multi-pack to increase it by just a few cents. I think that I don't support that for one reason. It's confusing to the retailers. So I just say, leave it as is. You know, there's a minimum price for one that came into play because price matters to young people. If something's 50 cents, they're more likely to buy it than if it's $2.50. And the same with, and it's none of the, you know, high-end cigars are not impacted. So if you're a cigar aficionado, this is not impacting you. You're going to get your high-end cigar at the regular price. And this is predominantly a
State law on this, Joyce?
no, this is a local decision. I mean, this would be locally. This and blunt wraps are both not part of the state law.
And the same is true with cigarettes. There's no state law prohibiting bargain pricing cigarettes.
No, there is. You cannot go below minimum. The state has minimum pricing for cigarettes.
And
Joyce, can you send me that info? Just, I had someone come in asking, I told them to ask you, but someone was asking about that minimum prices.
there seemed to be some notion that the law has changed, but you'd be
Yeah.
aware of that, Joyce, and
Yes, no, there's a minimum, a legal minimum standard, and it includes the $3.51 of taxes. That's why our cigarettes are higher than other, you know, states like New Hampshire. We have a higher excise tax.
Right.
So that's at the state level. So this is specifically on the small, and they used to be the cheap, sweet, you know, easy to get. Now it's just, they're not sweet, or they're not at least flavored. And that, again, currently in your regulation has existed for a while, and the same with blunt wraps. So just recommending that the city doesn't step backwards.
right, I agree. Moving on to number 9.
Yes. This is a yes, we can skip it. Free
Yeah.
distribution shouldn't happen. Existing in our current regulation is no coupons. We just shouldn't be discounting. I mean, in state law, there is something about discounting, but it doesn't specifically say coupons. So again, why make it cheaper? And they can't go below state minimum anyway.
Right. Good.
Those are good.
11 and 12 or
11 and 12 are unanimous, so we're fine there.
yeah,
The finding structure, so this, you had a couple answers. The finding structure, realistically, the only thing that would come into play is, so if somebody, if their blunt wraps were, or, you know, something that's prohibited was found in a store, right now it's a 100, 200, 300, which is the, why can't I think of it? It's like a parking ticket. 21D. So, no criminal thing, no nothing. That's not happening with the state law either, but so to be, if they had blunt wraps, the first violation would be 100. If they were found again in the same location within 36 months, it'd be 200. And a 7-day suspension, because that's just 2 violations within the 36 months. And the third would be a $300 fine and a 30-day suspension. Your suspensions for second and third violation, again, have been enacted for a long time. 7 days for second violation, 30 days for third within 36 months. If someone had a sale today and they, passed every inspection and every compliance check in 36 months, it would tick back to a first violation if there happened to be something. So currently it separates, and this would be the only 2 areas that would be different, is sale to a minor or finding flavor in a retail store when it's been prohibited for now 3 years. Those are 1,000, 2,000, 5,000. That's the minimum standard you can do. But these 2 items are local regulations, and you could keep them at the 100, 200, 300. It's more of a, administrative issue than it is for us, because it's a violation within the regulation, so it can go either way. But Danvers just adopted the all one, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000. I believe that Marblehead is looking at the same thing. Just to keep it consistent, Peabody did the same. So in terms of the administrative part of it, it doesn't matter if it's a blunt wrap or if it's you have flavor in your store, it's all a violation of this regulation.
Right. I can't remember how I voted on this, but it seems to me to make sense to keep us in line with the state law, but
I think that's how everybody, that is moving forward, and I'm doing a lot of these meetings, is just feeling like it's one regulation, it's one finding structure. And typically, I'll also tell you, to be honest with you, if I find something that is like a questionable product that wasn't clearly defined as a blunt wrap or clearly identified as a blunt wrap, I'm not writing fines. My goal is compliance. I don't want to put anybody out of business. I don't want them selling to minors. I don't want them selling things they're not supposed to. But if it clearly was a mistake, I would tell them, you can't carry this item and take it off your shelf now. And there isn't really a warning per se. But if it's a genuine, like, oh, I just didn't know this was a blunt wrap, then we just ask them to remove it.
Good. So what we're recommending, I guess, is what's called here the unified fine structure, right?
Correct.
So
correct. For discussion.
Yeah.
I keep it 36 months.
Yeah, and the tolling period means sort of the reset point, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I think, unless someone objects, 36 months sounds reasonable.
And that again has been in play for a long time in Gloucester.
Right.
15 for the suspension period. The only thing, so I'm going to ask just the 3-day, I think we had a discussion about this, and well, in fact, I know we did, and the board at the time agreed with my recommendation, since we already have a 7-day and already have a 30-day. State law requires that in the case of a first violation of a sale to a minor, so the difference is, if I went into a store and someone was carrying a menthol tobacco product, it would be $1,000 fine, but no suspension. But if the first violation was a sale to a minor, it has to have a suspension. State law says there has to be a suspension. But they left the time frame up to the boards. And my recommendation to our whole collaborative, and almost every municipality has adopted it, is a 3-day suspension. My rationale for that is we already have a 7-day. A 1-day, it almost seemed like a burden to a retailer, because all of the product has to come out of the store, off premise. and then be brought back. So 3 days is just a reasonable time between nothing and something. And the board agreed to this, I don't know, when Max was here, so I don't know how long ago that was, but it just never got captured in the regulation. It was voted upon and then never got incorporated into the reg.
I prefer the 3 days.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so I think, nope, one more, oh, shall and may. So shall has, the shall, again, this takes out the whole purpose behind this to the new members is, even if it sounds harsh, if you haven't lived through the stories and the appeals and the, shall just kind of sets it that it's level for everybody. It doesn't matter who you are, what the circumstance was, those are the fines and the suspensions. The may, I would say, may come into place if you decide like on a revocation because of a number of violations. Like if we had 4 violations or 5 violations in a 36-month period, instead of saying shall revocate their permit, leave it as may and just keep it in the board's hands to make that decision based on what you perceive or what is presented as egregious.
So whatever the sentiment is, I personally like the idea of taking all the debate out of the issue by having it shall.
I say shall.
Because it becomes very easy when somebody is sitting at the end of the table arguing with you that my kid's not gonna go to college because you're closing my shop down. It's much easier if it says shall. So I say go with shall.
I say shall. Agree.
And do you want me to leave the may in for any revocation language that's in the template?
I don't know, what's the sense?
Do you have to leave the may?
Well, I'll just tell you so Beverly was very clear because they had an egregious, like in their past, nothing to do with state law or flavor. It just had to do with an establishment that had 3 violations within 36 months. And then during a time of suspension, they were selling what they weren't supposed to even have in the store. And as a result of this problematic, and there were 2 establishments actually that were very similar. They were in, they're in violation of an order from the Board of Health. So they were selling concealed product when they were under suspension. So they made very, very tight language around egregious means you're out of the tobacco business. Not out of business, just out of the tobacco business. And that did help them when they had someone that was now fast forward many years, 3 or 4, and it was egregious with concealed products sold to a minor, flavored, a menu that offered these products to young people that they were circulating around the town. We had parent complaints, and they just felt like having that shall language gave them, if this wasn't egregious, like nothing was. But if that was may and you felt as strongly as a board, it would still say this meets the criteria of what you all consider egregious.
I still stay with shall.
Yeah. We don't necessarily have to make the decision tonight. You can put it in shall/may for the
Public hearing.
yeah, for the hearing.
Perfect. So that's it for me. And I'll draw up the draft. I'll get it to Lee prior to next month so she can get it to you all and you can see it. Like, I'll even highlight, this is the decision, but like state law is just going to be not highlighted anymore. It's just going to be incorporated in there. The highlights will be the couple changes that are, because you'll want to highlight those in your public hearing notice.
Yep.
Like the example of, merging the fines. And it'll make it easy if someone shows up at the public hearing for them to know what is changing. That's all.
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Joyce.
guys very much.
Thank you, Joyce.
Have a good night.
Yep, you too.
Thank you.
So, there are some violations that the board should be aware of. Does someone have
Oh,
those?
do you want me to stay for that?
Want her to stay for the violations?
Oh,
part of the
not
discussion?
necessarily, Joyce. I think the board should just be aware that, oh, I guess they're in the back here. But I thought there were 3 of them.
There are.
For the next page.
Is there another page? Oh, I see. I'll turn 2 pages here. So, Joyce, while you're still there, is there anything you'd want to say about these? I mean, it's, so for instance, I'd be interested in knowing, is there a spate that's happening in Gloucester alone, or are you seeing this throughout the North Shore?
I will tell you, across the state, the numbers are kind of surprising, given, the number of sales to minus is up. What I found most surprising both here and in Rockport had 2 failed compliance checks. There's only 2 stores. So you're 100% non-compliant. And the 3 stores that were here, that happened here, they haven't had violations in a long time. So I don't know what is changing. It wasn't a staffing issue because in 2 of the locations, I actually, for all the years I've been here, I actually knew who the youth identified as or maybe not as a salesperson, but the person who should have been aware was within hearing distance of the sale. My one question to you all is, given that we haven't captured the 3-day suspension, and given that the state law says there should be, in these cases, it's a first violation, and they're all a sale to a minor. So by state law and definition, they should have a suspension, but in other municipalities where it wasn't adopted at the local level, it was just a fine. So that's the question I would say for the board tonight, so that Lee can, do whatever administrative thing she has to do.
So the letters have already gone
They've already
out,
got it, yeah,
and they talk about the fine and the suspension?
no suspension.
No suspension, okay.
Just
Okay. So you're leaving it at no suspension?
Yeah, for
Yep.
these, let's do
I-
that.
I totally support that. And the other thing I'll just say to the board is I am working on, I've done educational trainings for retailers. And it's been very difficult. Prior to COVID is all when this happened. It was always in person. There was no such thing as Zoom 3 years ago to hold a big giant meeting. So my plan is moving forward to offer retailer trainings, either for owners or staff, it's up to them, quarterly, and do it in a Zoom setting, so that I know a lot of these, store owners are burdened by their own schedule, that they're all the time, the whole time it's open, or a family member. So if it's a 30-minute training, they could certainly make arrangements to be available and go sit in a back room for 30 minutes. But I just think, given this uptick, it's an opportunity for us to say, we're doing everything we can, and we don't want to fine you $3,000, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000. We want compliance. And it's as simple as asking for an ID. And for the new members, if I can just take less than 5 minutes, our youth are trained, they go through an FDA approved training, they go through a DPH approved training, they go through a training to identify the products that they'll be asking for. They can only ask for products that we tell them to ask for. They cannot carry anything on their person besides the money that we give them and their phone in case of an emergency, to notify us. They don't have an ID with them. And so my story has been for many, many years, and to new members, we give the retailer the best opportunity to do the right thing. And so when we see sales to minors, it's as simple as, you know, do you have an ID? And they don't, and they leave. It takes 2 seconds. So just, you know, when I am at a training, these are some of the things, and just if you have new clerks, you know, maybe put a new reminder up every month, change the color of it, you know, because pretty soon in that environment, everything looks like wallpaper. So these are some of the things that I would do on a Zoom and offer. And again, with the hope and intention of reducing some of these sales to minors. So just for your, yep.
Have you ever done that as a kind of like when restaurants like fail and they bring in a food safety, you know, the board requires them to bring in a food safety consultant. Have you ever done it that way too? If they have a sale to a minor or something that they're required to have a training?
No, we don't. We don't require it in the regulation, nor is it done in state law, but.
I mean, I just meant in general practice, has anyone ever done that?
They haven't, they've done it, but not through word or language in their regulation. And it would be impossible for me to do that because there's 450 retailers. But the state offers a free online training. And in several municipalities, the board has required that they attend that training.
Okay.
Good question, though. So that's it for me. I don't have to follow up with those, you know, if it's a fine, it's, you guys will do the administrative figuring out if they paid, but when there's a suspension, I normally, well, I do go out and follow up and ensure that the tobacco products have been removed, but if that's not the case, it's fine. And I'll go on with the draft and we'll get to the next step.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
again. Joyce.
Sure. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
So is there anything else at this hour?
I move to adjourn.
I will second.
Motion to adjourn has been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously. Thank you all for spending your evening with us.
It was a pleasure.